Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this movie review video as part of my horror franchise series for the month of June, which is the Psycho franchise. Today, we're going to take a look at the next film in that franchise, and that is Psycho 3 from 1986. I have the collector's edition, just like I do with the other ones here from Scream Factory. Some nice special features included. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it with the setup, the premise, and the cast. Then I'll get into my thoughts and review my overall feelings on the movie, which will be spoiler free as much as it can be. So yeah, Psycho 3 is a 1986 American slasher film, and it's the third film in the Psycho franchise. The screenplay was written by Charles Edward Pogue. The original electronic music score is composed and performed by Carter Burwell in one of his earliest projects. Psycho 3 is unrelated to the Robert Bloch's third Psycho novel, Psycho House, which was released in 1990. So basically, the film picks up right where Psycho 2 left off. Norman Bates is working at the Bates Motel again and lives with the preserved corpse of Emma Spool, a waitress who told him she was his real mother. When Spool remains missing after a month, Norman's ex boss, Ralph Statler, and local law enforcement grow concerned. Dwayne Duke, a sleazy musician desperate for money, is offered the job of assistant manager at the motel. Tracy Venable, a journalist from Los Angeles, is working on an article about serial killers being released from custody, believing that Norman is killing again. Believing that Norman is killing again, Tracy appears at the diner where he works and attempts to talk with him. Norman opens up, but is distracted when Maureen Coyle, a young mentally unstable former nun, enters. Maureen resembles his former victim, Marion Crane. Seeing the initials MC on her suitcase, Norman panics and leaves the diner. Mother enters Maureen's bedroom that night, intending to kill her, only to find that she has cut her wrists. The shock of this causes Norman to reassert his personality, while delirious Maureen mistakes Mother holding a knife for the Virgin Mary holding a crucifix. Norman brings Maureen to a hospital and offers that she stay as long as she needs to at the Bates Motel. After she is released, they begin a romantic relationship. So that's kind of the setup and the premise and the gist of where this movie starts and takes off from. Cast wise, of course, once again, we have Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. We have Diana Scarwood as Maureen Coyle. Jeff Fahey as Dwayne Duke. Roberta Maxwell as Tracy Venable. Hugh Gillen as Sheriff John Hunt. Robert Allen Brown as Ralph Statler. And Gary Bearer as Father Brian. So, yeah, my overall thoughts on Psycho 3. It's good. I like it. It is a step down from the first two Psycho movies. I'll be honest about that. At least in my opinion. Um, but that being said, I enjoy the movie for what it is. It's the third sequel in this franchise. There's definitely some problems with it, but let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with what I liked about the movie. So, this movie is a very well shot movie with great cinematography that really uses shadow and light to the utmost. There's definitely scenes where they really utilize this, and especially as it relates to like focusing on certain characters, it really adds to the effectiveness of the tension, especially as we get into the second half of the movie as well. So, yeah, that's really the first thing that stood out to me was the cinematography and how well it was shot with light and shadow. Definitely works to the benefit of the movie. I thought the performances overall are pretty good, especially by Anthony Perkins, Jeff Fahey, and Diana Scarwood, the three main leads in the movie. I thought they did a pretty decent job. I think the kills are good. Definitely more of an 80s slasher movie with decent blood and gore. I feel like even more than Psycho 2 that the kills are they definitely are right in the midst of the 80s slasher craze that's going on. So they definitely ratchet that up a bit with the blood and the kills that take place in this movie. One thing that separates this movie from the rest of the series is there's definitely an added element of humor and wit in this movie. The first couple of movies are a little bit more serious, a little bit more like mysteries and big shocking reveals. this movie they realize they don't really have much of a shocking reveal for you at this point in the franchise, instead they inject more of a different kind of tone, which definitely includes some humor, especially through the not only Dwayne Duke's character played by Jeff Fahey, but even Norman Bates himself. I feel like has more of a um, more humorous focused in this movie than the other movies. And I think that works pretty well. It never gets too campy or cheesy with the humor. There's still a nice balance there. I feel like with the humor that works for the most part, along with some more of the serious psycho themes that are still kind of there and present that also work as well. I think they did a really good job of blending those two elements in this movie. And that's not easy to do. There's a lot of horror movies that have tried and failed. But it makes for a fun and entertaining watch, I think. That's why even though, like I mentioned before, this movie is a step down from the first two movies, it's still good enough because of that entertainment value relating to that combo of horror and humor. I really like the last 20 minutes of the movie with the confrontation that we get, all the way through the final shot that we get of Norman and the end of this movie, the last scene of the movie, which really leaves it very creepy and effective. I felt like the movie did a pretty good job of progressing the overall story of Norman's character and kind of just where everything goes from the second movie. His journey forward it very well ties into the previous movie, which I really like. I think most horror fans are big. I know, at least for me, I'm a big continuity guy, and I hate it when you get a sequel and then it just basically ignores what happened in the movie before. This movie doesn't do that. It's very much related to the second movie, and almost works as an extension of the second movie, at least in terms of not denying anything that came before it, if that makes sense. It's definitely a different tone that they went for in this movie than the previous movie. But they keep that storyline and stuff, and so that it's got a nice transition into this movie. Um, and some of that's sort of shown by including some of the same characters as Psycho too, like Sheriff John Hunt and Ralph Statler and even the waitress, same actors and actresses to fill their roles, even though this movie was shot 3 years later. So that's just really nice from a continuity standpoint. I really enjoyed really enjoyed the movie from that standpoint. As I said, the movie definitely has its own unique tone and flavor within this franchise. In fact, I think yeah, it definitely stands out in that regard. It's much more of a sleazier and dirtier kind of movie, adding those elements of humor that I mentioned. It has a pretty unique score as well, more of like an '80s score. Those things make it very unique and very different make it stand apart from the rest of the franchise, I think. And I appreciate that in terms of not just copying from other movies, at least in that standpoint, in terms of the tone of the movie and the humor that's injected. It has more originality. So those are the pros that I have for this movie. I do have a few cons I have to go over as well. The biggest one is related to the story. It just doesn't really land. Especially as it relates to the character of Maureen and her journey that they really set up. I thought they set up well in this movie in the first two acts. Unfortunately, they don't stick the landing with it. That had good setups but without any plausible payoffs. That would really have brought it home. And that just kind of goes to this movie overall. I just don't think it's as well written as the first two Psycho movies. Again, they set up some interesting things, some things that definitely get you into the movie and want to see where they're going to go. But unfortunately, they don't really go anywhere, and that's one of the unfortunate parts about this movie. You have the lack of mystery or shocking twists in this movie, as I mentioned earlier. Like the first movie, of course, the big reveal of the split personality was the big shocking twist halfway towards the end of the movie. The second movie has the reveal of somebody's killing people around Norman. Is it him and he's blacking it out? Is it Lila Loomis who's trying to drive him back again? Of course, that's all revealed at the end. There's more of a mystery and sort of shocking reveals in the first movies. This movie really doesn't have that. It kind of knows what it is, and I think that's why they inject the comedy a little bit as well. Um, because it doesn't have the mystery and the shocking twists of the first two movies. This is much more of a balls to the walls, let's have fun with it, entertainment kind of movie, as opposed to like a thrilling, shocking mystery horror movie. Not to say there aren't aspects of horror in it yet, but the mystery's not really there, and I think they kind of knew that at this point of the franchise. So it was a nice change up in a way. I only bring it up though because if you're somebody that hasn't seen these movies before and you've seen the first two movies, I think that's the reason why this one's a little bit. It's going to be a bit more of a letdown if you're going into it with those same expectations as the first two movies. This is a completely different movie, both in tone and in what they're trying to go for here. Much more of an entertainment kind of movie to have fun with it. Um, so yeah, that's why I put that in. That's kind of more of a, I guess you could say that's more of a mix than a flat out con. But for some people, it might be a con. I was okay with it. Like I said, this is an entertaining movie, but that's just I just wanted to bring up that what they go for. You don't get the mystery and the shocking reveals in this movie. So I guess that's more the con I was focused on there. One of my big cons that really does come across, especially the last time I watched it for this review, is I feel like they try to parallel the original film way too much in this movie, and I think it's to this movie's detriment. Um, everything from setting up the this Maureen, which is kind of an homage to Marion and how her journey brings her to the Bates Motel, and then she wants to try to right a wrong that she had at the beginning of this movie. They do that, but then also stuff with Norman repeating scenes like pulling the picture off the wall and being a peeping tom to discovering something his mother did, and from the lines to his reactions, oh God, mother, blood, blood, and they just hit on it one note too many. I feel like in this movie, and I think it really holds this movie back. I don't think they needed to do that. So while I gave it credit for the originality, and not copying it in terms of the tone that they went for, and having that balance of humor and horror, I got to sort of pull back a little bit in the fact that they do try to repeat the beats of the first movie a little too much. Um, and it just doesn't work because obviously it's not as good as the first movie. He even repeats. We all go a little mad sometimes. It's just like I said. It was one beat too many. I like paying homages, and I think the second film did the best job of paying homage to the first film, while still being its own thing and not just a carbon copy in that regard. So that's one thing I have to bring up. Some people might be bothered by the fact that they do retcon the end of the previous movie. That might turn some people off. It might feel kind of cheap and disrespectful to the audience that watched the second movie. I'm okay with it because I think overall, from a Psycho standpoint, I mean, it wasn't the worst thing to reveal we get at the end of the second movie, and then having it, and maybe that's why I didn't mind it being retcon, because to me Norma is Norman Bates's mother, and but I understand why they did what they did in order to get these two movies as well in the middle of this franchise. So that's just something I wanted to point out to other people that might bother them, that they do retcon that. Not to the point that none of that happened in Psycho 2, but just in terms of the reveal that we get in Psycho 2 isn't quite what it's presented to be at the end of that movie or the beginning of this one. So, and then finally, that the characters are overall aren't quite as strong as the previous movies. Again, a lot of that goes back to writing. This movie's just not as well written as the first two movies, and that's especially in terms of characters. And like I talked about with Maureen and what happens with her, and that kind of drops the ball in the third act. The story is just not as well developed or executed because of that as well. So, but again, I didn't mind. The characters aren't horrible; they're just not as good. Overall, the biggest problem this movie faces, it's just the third movie that came after two just great horror movies. In the original Psycho, one of the great movies, and then Psycho 2, one of the great sequels. That's really this movie's biggest problem, is that it had to follow those two movies. So those are the cons I have. I know some people have some other cons. Another mixed aspect I'll mention is the score to this movie. I don't think it's quite as good of a score, effective as the second movie, or certainly not the first movie. But I don't hate it either. It has sort of an electronic, sort of 80s feel kind of score to it, that it sometimes throughout the film it works well, and other times they try to use it and it doesn't work as well. Namely as it relates to Norman and Maureen's love story. They got kind of a weird musical cues with that I don't think are that entirely effective. But then there's another scene towards the end of the movie where Norman's driving a car towards the swamp that something happens. I'm not going to give it away. And there I thought the score that they used, the music cues were pretty effective. So it's kind of a mix in that aspect. So overall, I do really enjoy Psycho 3. It is a movie that I can go back to and watch and get a lot of enjoyment out of. I will mention, too, I didn't really bring it up in my pros and cons. I do think it's Anthony Perkins' weakest performance as the character of Norman. But that being said, it doesn't mean it's bad. He's still good as the character of Norman. He's just not to the highest level of the first two movies where he really just nailed it as that character. But I do have to bring it up. Other people have brought it up probably a little bit more than I will because I don't think he's bad. I think he's good, and I think some of the reason why his performance is a little bit off in this movie is one, he's directing this movie as well as starring in it, which it's the first movie he's ever directed, so you got to cut him some slack there. When you consider that, I think he did a really good job with all that he had on his plate. And then also, I think his character, because of the kind of movie that he's in with this, with the comedy and the combination of the horror and the humor in this movie, his character comes off with his lines being a little bit more cheesy and not quite as strong. Like when he's approached by basically Duke's one night stand and she asks him to come and have a threesome, and then all of a sudden he cuts away and he goes, maybe. It's just kind of, but again, for this movie, it works. But it's just things like that I don't think Anthony Perkins is quite as strong. But again, he had a lot on his plate, and I think it's the tone of the movie. But I still really like him in this movie. Don't get me wrong. Don't think that I'm saying he's bad in this movie because he's certainly not. But overall, I think this is a really solid Psycho sequel. Just not as strong as the original or the first sequel, but it is a strong sequel within this franchise, especially when you compare it to other horror sequels and slasher sequels in the 80s. It really does hold up pretty well. It just doesn't hold up as well in comparison in the Psycho franchise, which really does speak to the high standards of this franchise, in my opinion. So I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. I think it's still a really good sequel that I can watch. Definitely more of an 80s slasher, kind of fits into that mold more than the first two movies did. 8 out of 10 is my rating. Go ahead and comment down below. Tell me what you guys think of Psycho 3. Do you really enjoy it as a Psycho sequel? Do you like it more than either of the first two movies, less than I like it in my review? Please comment down below. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos for this series. And also be sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss any of my great horror content that I have coming out over the next several months throughout the rest of the year, really. So that's my review for Psycho 3 as part of my Psycho franchise review. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.